Well, hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Sean Murphy. I'm president of Charlotte Atheists Agnostics. I want to thank everyone for coming. I would like to thank the Secular Student Alliance here at UNCC for co-hosting and providing us with this room. Really appreciate it. It helps us a lot. Tonight, we are fortunate enough to have two speakers from the American Humanist Association. I'm going to introduce them out of order. I'm going to talk about our second speaker first. His name is Speckhardt. He's executive director of the American Humanist Association. He has also made numerous appearances on television, radio, and print. His talk title today is In It to Win, Building a Non-Theist Rights Movement. Our first speaker is Maggie Ardiente, Director of Development and Communications for the AHA. And she's editor of the e-Design Humanist Network News that reaches over 40,000 subscribers weekly. Her talk is Humanism Today, an update from the AHA. I'm very excited to hear from both of our guests tonight. So let's first, please join me in welcoming Maggie Ardiente.
Is this not on? I'll just speak really loudly.
I don't know, can you hear okay in the back?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I'll just speak very loudly. Okay. Well, thank you again for having us. It's a real honor to be here. I'll mention briefly that I was vice president of the James Madison University Freethinkers when I was in college. So big fan of Secular Student Alliance and all of its wonderful affiliated groups. So thank you very much for having us. Despite the negative perception against people who don't believe in God, it's never been a more exciting time to be an atheist. And the American Humanist Association is proud to be one of the leading organizations working for the non-religious. The AHA currently has over 23,000 members and supporters, and over 120,000 followers on Facebook, and those numbers are climbing, so we're very excited. Our goal at the AHA is very simple: to promote the idea that you can be good without a belief in God. In Washington, D.C., we represent atheists, freethinkers, agnostics, and the nones or religiously unaffiliated, and work to remove the fear of coming out as an atheist. AHA lobbies regularly in Congress to support church-state separation and other progressive issues. We file lawsuits when our free speech rights are being violated, and we support over 160 local groups to build free thought communities. It's been a very busy time at AHA in recent weeks, and a lot of this has to do with the state of North Carolina, and Charlotte in particular. So thank you very much for keeping us very busy at the office. First, there was the state official who tried to introduce the bill recognizing state religion. I almost wanted this to pass, just to see religious groups fight over what that religion was going to be. But the big news, of course, was the announcement of Charlotte Mayor Anthony Fox's nomination, or Anthony Fox being nominated to be President Obama's transportation secretary, who also proclaimed a National Day of Reason, which was just this past week. So thanks to you, National Day of Reason gained more press this year than years before. Coverage in U.S. News and World Report, Washington Post, Associated Press, and of course, Fox News. Fox News, they brought on Penny Nance, president of Concerned Women for America, who criticized National Day of Reason by implying that reason led to the Holocaust. This is exactly the kind of rhetoric that we atheists and humanists have to deal with on a daily basis, which is what we're working to fight against. And I've been telling everybody to take a look at what happened here in Charlotte and the work that you did for Mayor Anthony Fox, and how important it is for everyone to reach out to their mayors and their elected officials to get things like National Day of Reason and Darwin Day sponsored. That is a big deal. Anybody could suddenly be nominated for the cabinet. Speaking about and so in addition to National Day of Reason being proclaimed in a lot of cities across the country, in Congress we were able to get Representative Mike Honda from California and DC Delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton to also support National Day of Reason. So we're very excited about that. Speaking of our lobbying efforts in DC, this year we were also excited to reintroduce for the second time a resolution in Congress declaring February 12th as Darwin Day, thanks to Representative Rush Holt of New Jersey and 8 other co-sponsors. The Darwin Day resolution is the first sponsored House resolution put forth by a free thought organization in history, a formal recognition of the academic contributions of Charles Darwin, and the support of, or actually the denouncement of attempts to insert intelligent design and creationism in public schools. Our legal team is ramping up our efforts as well. The Oppignani Humanist Legal Center employs 2 staff attorneys and has built a network of over 50 lawyers across the United States to take action when atheist rights are being violated. The AHA has successfully intervened in over a dozen cases this past year, from protecting the rights of students to wear anti-religious clothing to defending atheist advertisements on public buses. We just filed a lawsuit against a public school in Mississippi that held a Christian assembly during school hours, and when students attempted to leave the assembly, they were refused. But it's not enough to do just lobbying and just lawsuits. Our education center develops humanist curriculum so that local chapters can establish humanist education programs for youth, particularly important if we are to instill values like critical thinking in our next generation. Our affiliate organization, the Humanist Institute, which provides half of a master's degree in humanist studies, has just been accredited by Saybrook University in San Francisco, laying the groundwork for jobs in humanism. We train and certify humanist celebrants, so we can have more people performing non-religious weddings, funerals, and other types of ceremonies. And as I mentioned before, we have over 160 local chapters across the country. We're one of the largest among the national free thought groups. Now, I mention all of these projects because these days, most people think that the American Humanist Association does one thing and one thing only, and that's try to destroy Christmas. Which is a little true, but not all true. Today, our biggest challenge is how do we reach out to the religiously unaffiliated, this 19% of all Americans? This question launched the AHA's advertising campaign in 2005 to reach out to other humanists. That was our goal. We first began with full-page advertisements in major newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post, progressive magazines like The Nation and American Prospect. The AHA's first humanist billboard in 2008, which appeared near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and co-sponsored with Free Thought Action with this guy right here, Joseph Stewart, garnered significant press and controversy for its bold statement, "Don't believe in God, you're not alone." The AHA later established billboards and sponsored bus ads in other cities across the country, particularly in Washington, D.C., and usually around the holiday season. Our past ad campaigns include one that featured Santa Claus and the words, "Why believe in a God? Just be good for goodness' sake." And another campaign called Consider Humanism, which compared extreme Bible quotes with Promoting Humanism, which aired during NBC. It also resulted in my all-time favorite piece of hate mail, which we usually get a lot of, especially during Christmas. And so I'd like to read a short piece of this hate mail to you. This letter is from a person named Don, and he writes, "You people are complete idiots. People like you are the reason this country is in a downward spiral. I'll see you in hell and will voice my opinion there more intensely." So if you see a guy named Don, and we all go to hell, he's going to talk to us. Anyway. Our most recent advertisement this past December drew attention to our new website, kidswithoutgod.com, an online resource for kids and teens to learn more about humanism through interesting videos, fun games, and practical advice, such as how to deal with bullying and religious proselytizing in schools. The ads feature a young kid with the words, "I'm getting a bit old for imaginary friends." That one was a little bold. We had a debate at the office whether or not we should do that, but it worked out. So these ads and all the programs, it's just a small fraction of everything that we really do at AHA. And when we think about the millions of dollars that groups like Focus on the Family, Alliance Defense Fund, you know, these are people that are doing more than simply saying, we're Christian people and we want more people to be Christian. They're actively putting their funds and their efforts to win cases against gay marriage, against women's advancement, against women's rights, and against the rights of atheists and humanists like you and me. So it's not enough to just come out and say that you're an atheist. You have to act out. You have to be part of local groups, and you have to really be involved. I truly believe that we're in the midst of a civil rights movement for non-believers. The right to live free from religious coercion, and the right to question the existence of God. And it's worthwhile to remind ourselves that we, as free thought activists, are working on behalf of so many people who feel the need to remain in the closet about their atheism. People who are afraid of losing their jobs, kids who are being afraid of being kicked out of their homes. So to be a member of a local atheist group like this really does make a difference, and we really thank you for your involvement. So I encourage you to learn more about AHA, to join as a member, to join us on Facebook, and learn more about the work that we do everywhere on your behalf. Thank you very much. So now I'll go ahead and introduce Roy. He's the executive director of the AHA. He's been executive director for 10 years. and has appeared on Good Morning America, CNN Headline News, National Public Radio, and Fox News. When Roy appeared on Fox News, he debated Bill Donahue of the Catholic League. And Bill Donahue called Roy a cannibal, because if you don't have the Bible to guide your morals, we all turn into cannibals. And our favorite person in the world, Mr. Bill O'Reilly, he called Roy the head humanist. He said it like it was an insult, but I think if Bill O'Reilly insults you, you know you've made it in this world. Please welcome Roy Speckhardt.
How's the volume of and the folks in the back? This one? I'm not I'll turn it back on if I need. We'll leave it at this. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about some changes that have been occurring in America that I think some people have started to see, but I think there's some details to it that help us realize what direction we want to go in. As you know, the number of people who would vote for an otherwise qualified candidate for public office who happen to be an atheist is a low number. It's rising slowly. I think it was 46% and 47%. I think maybe we're at 48 right now. I forget what the latest number is. However, it still puts us in last place compared to any other religious group or minority group in the country. It has that's otherwise perceived positively. Those negatively, we're also pretty low down the list. I think we're tied with rapists as far as people you would vote for otherwise who was a qualified candidate for public office. So the truth is, there is this prejudice that exists against us, against our community. And we want to move from this place of prejudice to one where there's tolerance, to a place where there's mutual respect, to a time when there's common appreciation for the reason-based, science-oriented approach to solving problems that we have. One area where change is overdue is in the court system, in the rights of our growing minority as it pertains to what we can do to defend ourselves in courts. And whether we recognize it or not today, we are actually, and this sounds a little ominous, but we're held captive to the religious right leaders who remind us of our inferior position by using the power of government to enforce laws that put truth claims about religion before us at every turn. Now, it's not some sort of conspiracy, but they definitely have a willful effort to make this happen, and they have a lot of money and organization behind it. And there's examples that give evidence for this. We have to endure statements about our nation's trust in a fictional God, not just on our money, but also on public buildings and in ceremonies for public office, from census worker to president. Our children and grandchildren have to hear a statement that excludes them and their family every day in school, and if that weren't bad enough, they're asked to stand up and join with the majority in saying, we have to watch on as our neighbors go unpunished for child abuse because they claim religious exemptions to certain laws. And such exemptions may also apply to vaccinations that leave our own children more vulnerable to disease. We have to spend our tax dollars in schools in most states where many teachers refuse to teach that the evidence massively supports a theory of evolution that tells us everything we know about biology, or unites everything we know. And in an even more blatant display of unfairness, our tax dollars are spent in religious charitable organizations that exclude us from employment and exclude us even from their services. And the more we come out of the closet in certain communities as people who don't happen to believe in a God, the more we observe new limitations in our business, opportunities, and public life. And perhaps what's worse is that the legal battles our movements engaged in order to improve our predicament, are losing at an unprecedented and unacceptable rate. So, we used to be successful, of course, in the courts, right? We remember back in the days of, or at least read about them in school, I know I did, about Ellery Shemp, who 50 years ago, later this month actually, it's the anniversary of it, where he won that case that forbade Bible teachings in public schools. And then there was Vashti McCullum's case, just around the same time, a little before him actually, where she won the right to forbid actual public prayers led by the school officials. And so there were a lot of victories like that in the 60s and the 70s and so forth.
that we look for and we think, oh, well, the courts are bastion. We can go to the courts for relief when we have troubles. However, that has changed. And one of the reasons it's changed is that judges are less sympathetic to our cause than they used to be. And that didn't happen by chance. When Michael Newdow's first case against Under God and the Pledge of Allegiance was being considered, George W. Bush said, quote, "It points up to the fact that we need common sense judges who understand that our rights were derived from God." An implication that he intended to directly violate the constitutional prohibition against a religious test for public office. Then, Bush ended a 50-year history of using the advice of the American Bar Association to consider judicial candidates, replacing the ABA with the advice of the Conservative Federalist Society. And unlike his predecessors, when it came down to what he actually chose, he went on to appoint only conservative Catholics and evangelical Christians to the federal bench, stacking it against us and anybody who might want a strong First Amendment. And he did that in a way that was unlike his father and unlike Reagan, who appointed much more broadly religiously focused judges to the federal bench. So, while devotees of the religious right may not understand the workings of the universe as well as humanists and atheists too, they certainly understand the power of money, and they have been very good at figuring out how to challenge us in the courts. For instance, now, when we claim there's a religious monument on public land, they sell a portion of that land just big enough for the monument to a church or other private entity. Now, when we claim our right to be free of religious indoctrination, they claim their free speech is being threatened. Now, when we claim the government is imposing sectarian religion, they undermine our standing to even bring the lawsuit. What's the result? Sadly, as a movement, at least when it comes to the precedent-setting cases, we're losing more and more. And the main problem with bringing Establishment Clause cases today is standing. And even if cases where plaintiffs do have standing, the courts increasingly are reluctant to rule on Establishment Clause grounds. The courts tend to justify government endorsement of religion as accommodation, or as historically acceptable, or as de minimis, such as in God We Trust challenges. So let's delve a little deeper into what that means so that you can see how that works. First of all, what's meant by standing anyway? Any budding lawyers or lawyers in the audience that want to tell us about standing? No. Well, in order to get the courts to hear your case, you have to show that 1, you've been wronged or injured, 2, that something can be done about it, and 3, that you're the right person or organization to bring the complaint. So it's normally not enough to say I'm a taxpayer in this case back in the days when we were winning, called Flass v. Cohen, which created an exception to allow taxpayer standing for people in church-state separation cases, because there's otherwise almost no way to bring those types of cases, thought the courts back then. And the bad news, of course, is that the Flass exception has been chipped away at in recent years, and now it's incredibly difficult to bring these sorts of challenges under the Establishment Clause. And so there were a number of cases that got us there. One example is the Valley Forge Christian College case versus Americans United for Church and State, where a portion of land from a closed army hospital was given to a Christian college, and Americans United sued. In a split Supreme Court, surprisingly ruled that AU didn't have standing to bring this case because the gift was made without a regard to a decision by Congress, as if that seemed to have some bearing on this thing. They said it was just an action by a government agency and it didn't impact the taxing and spending power of government. So, as more conservative justices were added to the bench, our likely success in this area went downhill. And indeed, in 2007, the court denied taxpayer standing to Freedom from Religion Foundation and to any future taxpayers challenging the federal funds to support executive branch government actions. Now, on our side, Justice Souter argued in his dissent that when an executive agency spends identifiable sums of tax money for religious purposes, no less than when Congress authorizes the same thing, taxpayers suffer injury. But who knows how long it'll be before Souter's opinion prevails, given what we see in the federal courts today. Let's see. Also, another little development that I think is worth mentioning. In 2005, the court ruled in Cutter v. Wilkinson that there could be more religious exemptions to secular rules. And I call these special rights for the religious, because they allow religious people to opt out of the rules. Can you think of examples where special rights are given to the religious to accept them from the rules that we normally would live by? Daycare. Others? Where vaccinations, wearing special hats and photos, and bringing, perhaps in some states, bringing a little dagger to school with you if you're Sikh. There's lots of exceptions to the rules that exist for all sorts of folks. And, well, in Cutter v. Wilkinson case made it worse, because it used to be that the burden was on the individual to prove that the state was limiting their religious liberty. Now, the individual was assumed correct, and the government had the burden of proving that the exception that was being requested made a problem for the state. So you can see how that really shifted the dynamic considerably, and the ruling's now being used by the religious right to argue for all sorts of special religious rights. During this period, the court also upheld vouchers for religious schools, allowed schools to participate in federal aid programs that were religious, allowed public school teachers to be sent mandatorily into religious schools for teaching projects. And on top of that, the federal courts recently concluded that in God we trust is not a problem on our currency, in government buildings, or as a national model. In fact, our losing record is so bad that our friends are becoming wary of helping us. A former board member of the National ACLU confided in us, in me actually, that they are taking less than 10% of the church-state separation cases that they used to. And our Jewish and interfaith friends have nearly left the field in helping us. And Americans United for Separation of Church and State is reasonably arguing that we use extreme caution so that we don't create more bad precedent. For those of you who don't know how that process works, if we bring a piece of legislation like Darwin Day resolution every year to Congress and suggest that they should pass it so that we support sound science education instead of intelligent design and the like. Every year we bring it, we have a better chance of success. We can keep doing it on and on without any problems. But with a court case, if you lose that case, you set a precedent, you can't bring it again. It's a problem. So that creates the situation that we're in today. And it sounds like we need to develop new strategies like the religious right did in the 70s and 80s. And the good news is we did. We have a plan. Anyone remember how same-sex marriage first became legal in Massachusetts, Connecticut, Ohio, a few other places? They used the courts, and they used the courts in a particular way. It was argued that a prohibition on same-sex unions violated gay and lesbian couples' right to equal protection under the law, as stated in the state constitution. And there are two key elements here. First, the basis was equal protection argument, which is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution's 14th Amendment and ensures that all groups get equal protection under the government for their rights. And in this case, that was same-sex couples deserving the same protection as that of opposite-sex couples. The second key element of this success was it was in the state courts, smartly steering clear of those federal courts that we've been talking about earlier. And it was possible to keep the battle in the states because almost every state has a equal protection clause like that in the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution in their state constitution. And if you bring it under the state constitution, they can't go into the federal courts. Very clever process that was developed, and we can do the same thing in protecting the rights of humanists, atheists, and other freethinkers. This seemingly obvious approach hasn't ever been tried before, perhaps because our movement didn't see itself as a group that was united and worthy of equal protection. But our legal coordinator, Bill Burgess, and our team of pro bono attorneys all around the country are convinced that this will be the critical factor to our future success. And there's plenty of support for this in the case law. A court said back in 1994, just as government cannot segregate people on account of their race, so too it may not segregate on the basis of religion. And they said, a government cannot be premised on the belief that all persons are created equal when it asserts God prefers some. So, The Establishment Clause taxpayer standing dilemma that we talked about a little bit is not the same kind of problem here either, because proof of injury is satisfied by the unequal treatment itself, because religious discrimination is presumptively unconstitutional, meaning the government would have to show a compelling reason for any unequal treatment. So here, what needs to be proven is just the unequal treatment or discrimination against the person's group, in our case, non-theists. When the government provides a benefit to one group, religious citizens, by erecting a religious monument on public land, it makes the excluded group feel less important or second class to the majority. So, it has an advantage of the old sponsorship of religion cases too, by the way, because it presents the argument as direct discrimination. We're not talking about an abstract concept in the Constitution that some people get, some people don't. Church-state separation sounds really easy for folks in our movement to understand, but as we know, unfortunately, the general public doesn't always agree. But this is basic and straightforward. We're being discriminated against. It needs to end. So, we've identified a handful of states where we're going to test this theory and strategy, the first of which is Massachusetts, where we filed our case against Under God and the Pledge of Allegiance. And our past president, who I believe was here recently, David Niosi, is personally arguing this case. And he's showing that utilizing Under God language in daily patriotic ceremonies in Massachusetts public schools results in 3 problems. First, by even doing it in the first place, it creates a situation where there's prejudice against the group, because daily affirming to children in a patriotic context that the country is under God is obviously opposed to what we view. Second, it creates this situation where kids are stuck. They have a no-win situation. They either participate in the pledge and affirm this prejudice against themselves, or they don't participate in the pledge, don't get to participate in the patriotic exercise, and risk ostracizing themselves from their peers. It's not what we want to see happen. And so in this case, we handily brushed past the defending school district's motion to dismiss, and in writing our case had merit to be heard, the first judge reiterated our position, saying that the state would have to have a compelling reason to act in a way that discriminates on this religious question. She went on to say that participation in a ceremony with those reciting Under God falsely creates a sense of social unanimity with regard to this religious affirmation. The next judge in the district court level wasn't quite as brave as the first, and tried to get the case sidelined on some technicalities. But we appealed, fixing our argument, and were quickly considered, and I forget the legal term for this, but it was jumped up to the Massachusetts Supreme Court, where they're going to be hearing that in September. So I think that this new strategy doesn't just apply to Under God cases either, by the way. It could be useful for many church-state separation arguments taken from the non-theistic perspective. And so while the religious right is arguing that separation of church and state is not a concept that can be found in the Constitution, we're trying to bring the concept of atheist humanistic equality into the U.S. legal scene. And with it, we aimed to stand up for our rights, and as well as all Americans, to believe or not believe as they see fit. Thank you.